Hi everyone, I hope that you had a great Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to the moms out there. And so tonight I'm going to be discussing stilt walking, the West Indian and Mayan connection. The purpose of this presentation is to show the cultural connections that West Indians have with Mesoamericans, particularly the Mayans. I hope to bring attention to the indigenous American culture and ancestry that is largely ignored among West Indians and any people that are perceived as being, black or Afro, this and that, but particularly in the Caribbean. This presentation is not saying that descendants of African people do not exist in the Americas. It's simply pointing out the, the indigenous American influence in the cultures throughout the Americas, particularly Caribbean islands, that goes ignored. And so that's the purpose of many of my videos, to educate in order to stop the erasure of indigenous American people. Because in order for us to restore ourselves, we have to practice and acknowledge the culture for what it is and not for what Europeans say it is. And if not, then that will just continue the erasure of, indigenous people and oppression of indigenous people in the Americas, throughout the Americas. So that's my purpose for doing this presentation tonight. Stilt walking. Stilts are walking devices that make the person who's wearing them appear much taller. The person stands on large, slender poles equipped with raised footrests and walks elevated above the ground. Stilt walking is practiced all throughout the Caribbean islands. In the background here is actually an image of stilt walkers in Barbados. Mokojumbi. Mokojumbis are stilt walkers in Trinidad and Tobago, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and other parts of the Caribbean islands. The term Moko is said to come from an African god from the Nuwapa people from Nigeria and Congo, although the origins of this are disputed. In my research, I never found a Moko god among African people. I only found an African goddess by the name of Umbokomu, and she's considered the woman of the earth, of the first ancestors, and the first gardener among the Ngombe people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I never actually found any concrete evidence or any African source which spoke on a god by the name of Moko, and everything that I saw that spoke on Moko pointed to the Caribbean. It was about Mokojumbi. There remains little historical documentation of specific West African stilt dancers in the 17th through the 19th century, when enslaved Africans were brought to the Caribbean islands. The term Moko means diviner and was traditionally represented by a man high on stilts, as if he was in a celestial realm, who performed acts that were unexplainable to the human eye. He's said to have walked across the Atlantic Ocean from West Africa all the way to Trinidad, and the figure is said to protect the city and carnival goers from evil. And so that's from a book titled Stilt Walking: History and How To by Roy Malloy. It is also said that the meaning of the term Moko differs depending on who you ask. So there's not really one story surrounding this origin term Moko. So could it be that it comes from the Americas and, just they have cognitively lost the knowledge of, this? Because I never saw anything in Africa talking about a Moko. Moko is also said to move in the night, striking terror in the hearts of those who have done wrong. The term Jumbi is a West Indian term for a ghost or malevolent spirit. This term comes from the Americas. It appears to have different meanings depending on where it's used. In Guyana, it's said that the Jumbi is a spirit of a dead person, particularly one who was evil when they lived, and they're also believed to have the ability to shapeshift. So if I'm pronouncing these words wrong, please forgive me. So yeah, just wanted to say that. But so just from my understanding of reading all the different things about this Moko Jumbi, is that it's a diviner type of spirit that protects others from harm and punishes those who do evil. I also read an article that was stating a man in Toronto was teaching the Mi'kmaq natives in Canada stilt walking, and this was back in, I think, 2014. So in that way, culture is being shared among people in different tribes throughout the Americas. So people are like, oh, this comes from this people, this comes from that people. As long as we're interacting with each other, there's going to be different things we're going to pick up tribe to tribe, you know what I mean? Like different countries, different nations. This is just what happens when people interact. So this is the image of Moko jumping in Trinidad and Tobago. This is at a carnival in 2019. And this is an image of stilt walkers in Haiti at the Carnival of Del Mar in Port-au-Prince back in 2014. Jean Canoe is a cultural dance and musical celebration unique to the Bahamas that dates back hundreds of years. There are several theories about its origins. One is that it's named in tribute to Jean Canoe, an African tribal chief, but another is that it derives from the French Jean Inconnu, meaning unknown people, in reference to the masks that were worn in the original Jean Canoe parades of the 18th century. Some say it began as a slave celebration on one of the few holidays from work that they were granted during the year. So here we go with basically these different stories. It's not really one concrete thing, so it's kind of like an unknown origin. And that usually happens when it comes to indigenous practices of the Americas. Because over the years, just due to all the colonialism and, calling, renaming people this and that and this and that, and, colonizing people, raising indigenous children in these colonial schools, people tend to forget after all of that has happened to their group of people. So, at least to an extent. So, whenever people are disconnected from the knowledge of who they are, the culture gets lost, and that's the entire reason why I do these presentations, to reconnect the culture back to the people. So. The music of the festival is also said to be influenced by American blues, West African drums, and Caribbean culture. Jean Canoe Festival also has stilt walkers, and this is how the people of the Bahamas celebrate Christmas and New Year's. And these are just some dancers. I wanted to share this image to point out the fringes around the legs. This is commonly worn among American Indians, particularly in the Caribbean islands. But it also looks like the top portion of this outfit has like some European or maybe like some type of Mediterranean influence. And here at one of the Jean Canoe festivals, we have this float type of thingy, I don't know what it would be called, of an American Indian man. So we see him here, we see his headdress, and we see him. He has the fringes on and everything. So this reminds me of the Mardi Gras Indians in New Orleans, Louisiana. That's really what that image reminds me of. And here's some musicians playing the trumpets. So where else did we see these trumpets being played? Among the Mayan people. In Bonampak, ancient Mayan city situated in a tributary of the Usumacinta River, I don't know if I pronounced that one right, now in eastern Chiapas, Mexico, the site's engraced and sculpted upright stela, which is the upright stone, and its detailed murals document the ritual, life, war practices, and political dynamics of the late classical period of the Mesoamerican civilization. So, some people may try to refute what I'm saying and say, well, the trumpet in the stela is a gourd trumpet. It's not the same one that they're using in the Jean Canoe image. But here's the thing. People change throughout time. As people come in contact with others, they use different types of materials. So that doesn't mean that practice did not originate from the Mayans. It doesn't mean that there's no Mayan ancestry there. And I personally have never heard anyone play the trumpet like melanated men have. I just haven't. And I actually touched on this in my video, It's Not Black Nor Ghetto, It's Indigenous. So check that out if you haven't seen it already. And I'm going to post a link to that in the description box. Now back to the presentation. These are Jean Canoe stilt walkers here. Donald Chambers, a historian studying Igboisms in the Jamaican Jean Canoe masquerade, stated, like Jean Canoe in Jamaica, Moko Jumbi may have been a Creolism, not just entirely made up by slaves out of nothing. African slaves generally drew on what they knew to create what they needed in New World situations. Creolisms, therefore, were a combination of the familiar and the functional. The point should not be to look for one-to-one traits, but to look at ancestral forms in specific culture areas as resources on which slaves drew in order to adapt to the conditions of slavery in particular places in the Americas. So, he's using the word may, which means they're trying to find the origins of this practice, but they're not quite sure. But he's just saying African, as most people do whenever they see a person with darker skin, they just say African. It's part of the European colonial conditioning. Um, and then we also hear the word Creole. And so when we think of Creole in the United States, we think of someone who is mixed with European, African, and American Indian. So basically, this guy is saying in this statement to look at the culture in the areas where the people are. You know, he says they drew on what they knew to create what they needed in New World situations. And he said the point should not be to look for one-to-one traits, but to look at ancestral forms in specific culture areas as resources on which slaves drew to adapt to conditions of slavery. Ancestral forms, well, damn, where are they? You know what I mean? So, also for those who try to say the Caribbean and Mesoamerica, like, those are two different places and entities. Trade was done between people of the Caribbean and Central America. People were going back and forth. And with as many people who are being enslaved, there's been individuals from tribes, as far south as South America who were brought to North America and vice versa, taken to the Caribbean from North America, and a lot of that was going on. So that's another thing to kind of debunk whatever excuses people are going to come up with to try to say, well, this is inaccurate. And here's an image of Mayan stilt walking. This image is from the Codex Madrid. It's a person walking on stilts wearing a loincloth around the waist and what appears to be an elaborate ceremonial headdress. Among the ancient Mayans, performers danced on stilts during religious ceremonies for good fortune. And I read something on one website that said stilt walking was brought to the Americas by blacks from West Africa, but clearly that's not true, as I'm showing you right now that there were Mayan stilt walkers. And for one thing, again, black what? Because that nobody was called black before Europeans placed that name on people. People didn't go by that name because it's nothing. So, it's a European construct. So when people say, oh, blacks came from Africa, well, first off, there's no blacks in Africa. They have their own tribes. They have their own tribal names. So it's just ignorance all the way around with people trying to make these statements and comments and not educated enough to really know what they're talking about. They're just going off of what they've been taught in school, which is not much. And why would the stilt walking have to be brought all the way from Africa when people were already here who practiced it? That would make no sense. Unless there's something that, another thing you could think about, well, maybe they saw similarities in their cultures with the Mayans, and so then they got together and then they mingled together. And if they mingled together, then you still can't say that the people who, are dark skinned and are called West Indians have no American Indian ancestry, because if they mingle together, then they do. So they have just as much of a claim to this land as anyone else who is usually, I've seen people who are white passing try to take, darker skinned people's claim to, their indigenous American heritage and stuff, and to this land away from them. But you can't do that because with a number of African people, there was admixture that happened, in the Caribbean, in Latin America. So I just wanted to add that in. So this is a drawing of that Mayan stilt dancer. And in the book Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán by the Spanish Bishop Diego de Landa, he speaks on the blessings and misfortunes that occur to the Mayans depending on the year. So in order to avoid drought and poor maize crops, Mayans would perform ceremonies. They would dance on stilts and they would give sacrifices of turkey heads, bread, and maize. The Popova, the Mayan Book of Council, also mentions walking on stilts. And the Spanish bishop Diego de Landa, he was also the same person who had the Mayan codices destroyed by burning. I think about 27 of them were destroyed. And these codices had information pertaining to the culture. So if people are wondering how culture is lost, that's one way. Destruction of artifacts, destruction of the codices, murdering the elders so that there's no older people who can pass on that history. And putting the younger ones in these colonial schools, brainwashing people with this religion, their religion, their Abrahamic religions. This is the type of stuff that happens. So these are just a few ways of ripping the culture and knowledge of a people away from a people. That's how you do it right there. And that's what happened. Like I always say, it's not entirely gone. That's why I'm showing these connections, to show that it's not entirely gone. These cultural practices are not entirely gone. They're just, in many cases, not cognitively, people are not cognitively aware of what they're doing. It's just something that's genetic, and so they just naturally practice it. I also remember reading about it was one article, I can't remember the name of this article, but it was speaking on the Moko Jumbi people, right? Not the Moko Jumbi people, but this Moko Jumbi character. And it was saying to come up with the name that the people did some research in Africa. So it's not even something that, and again, I told you, I couldn't find that research in Africa. I couldn't find anything that pointed to a Moko god in Africa. So it's not really anything that, if that is the case, then it's just showing you, oh, well, they're just looking at that and then they're taking that on. It's not something that came from them. But if it's something that we obviously can't find the origins of this Moko god, then it's something that came from them. That more than likely is genetic memory that comes from the indigenous people over here. So here's some images of stilt dancers in Belize and in Mexico. So this is Belize in 2012, and these are stilt dancers near Oaxaca, Mexico in 1941. Their stilts aren't as high though, but let me see if I can go back to the image. These stilts look pretty high to me. These not so much. So in the conclusion, again, the argument of the similarities. So for people who say African and indigenous American cultures have similarities, yeah, there are definitely some. The drum playing, the stilt walking, so there's similarities between indigenous people everywhere on this planet. So that's neither here nor there. Moko Jumbi connection with Mayan stilt walkers. Moko Jumbi is basically, like I said, the spirit that protects people from harm and harms those who do evil. But the Mayans did stilt walking in order to protect their society from misfortune. So these are both similar in that the stilt walking and the dancing is done to protect, whether it's the people, the society, the crops, whatever. And also, again, like I just stated, not everything from these original indigenous cultures are gone. The practices simply are not being recognized as the original culture of the people from over here. So, yeah, and stilt walking has practiced in various places throughout the world. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you found any other connections between West Indian culture and Mesoamerican culture, or any other culture, any other indigenous culture throughout the Americas? And do you think that there is indeed a connection between West Indians and Mayans? So let me know. Sound off in the comments. Click the bell to be notified if you haven't already subscribed, or click that bell. Get my book, Prayers, Musings, and Poetry for Indigenous People Living Under Colonial Rule. That's on Amazon. Check out my shop, Attic Indigo, and my shoe line, Kaona. And links are in the description box. So have a good night, everyone, and stay safe.